Hi, I'm Abigail. I'm here to talk about photography, how I relate to it, and how I can help you get those incredible photos that you'll absolutely love. So this is part two of talking about what is art. And I'm going to be honest, this has not been the ideal filming situation. I use mainly natural light with a reflector to do this, and the weather just wasn't what I thought it was going to be. So it's been light and dark and rain and pause and stop and go. Also, some of my neighbors are fixing their roof because there's been roof tiles that fell off, so there might be some hammering in the background. Anyway, this is part two. Also, it's cold. So I put on a coat over what I was wearing because I'm cold and I don't want to be cold, so here we are. Part two. In part one, I talked a lot about different people's definitions and quotes and things like that, and I really like that. I enjoy that. I think it brings a nice perspective that's not just my opinion out here, but now I'm going to talk about my opinion. And specifically, I want to start with what my perspective on art has been for a very, very long time. And I mean since like I was a young teenager. I always thought that art was something to aspire to. I thought it was so important to everybody's lives, but specifically for myself personally, I thought that art was like, in many ways, the pinnacle of what I could achieve with my life. And I wanted, and I still want, this has been for a very long time, my goal has been that my life is art. And I think that even though you can find art in anyone's life, or anyone can find art in their lives, what I specifically meant by that and what I still see in that, and it's changed a lot over the years, but is the idea that I do everything as an expression of art. And some things more than others. I mean, a very obvious thing to look at, and this is something that has gone through many different phases in my life, but fashion, I think, is truly an art form. And it is something that for myself, I wanted it to be a representation of who I am, but also who I want to be. And I think it's that thing of like dress for the job you want to have. But even bigger than that, to me it was dress for the life you want to have and dress for the person you want people to think you are. And not in like I'm conning you into believing that I'm one thing when I'm actually something else, not at all. But really trying to, when you walk into the room, first impressions, so much of that is made up by what you wear, and people don't always know who you are, and a lot of people they'll wear one thing but their personality is completely different, or they wear something and that is their personality but it just doesn't come across the right way. And to me, I wanted to let my outfit speak for me way before you ever have a conversation with me. And there was definitely times where I did this less and I got really lazy in life. I think right now I am struggling with fashion simply because I have so many interests and I'm like, well, what do I dress for? Which one do I pick? And so I'm kind of dressing for all of them, and it just depends on what day it is, what I'm gonna wear. But I still do this. I still dress not just for who I am, but who I want to be. I dress for the job I want to have, and something super simple for that is most photographers will wear black, and this is becoming less common, where photographers are feeling more freedom to wear whatever they want. But a great reason, like it's not a bad idea for a photographer for various reasons to wear black. One is your clothes are not going to reflect colors onto whatever subject you are photographing. Black is a really nice, white in a similar way. White can work as a reflector and you're reflecting just pure white light. If, for instance, you got like a white t-shirt or something like that, but black doesn't add light to your photo, doesn't add colors to your photo, your subject, whatever you're taking, and it also helps you blend into the background where you're not distracting, especially if you're doing an event or something like that. You're not distracting from what's happening, and people notice you less, and they can be more natural in whatever's going on. So that is one thing that I've done. I naturally always wore a lot of black, and as a photographer, I put together specific outfits that I'm like, this is very intentional, this is what I want to do for an event, or for this type of like having more casual, less casual outfits, that kind of thing that I'm going through. I've always been someone who prefers to dress up rather than dressing down. I feel more comfortable when I'm dressing up. And that's why I also encourage people, if I'm ever going to take a picture or do photo session for you, dress what you feel comfortable in. If that's dressing up, then do it. If that's dressing down, then do it. But be comfortable first and foremost. So for me, bigger picture, that's kind of zoomed into one thing, but I've always considered my life as my primary artistic expression. And so that would be including everything. And definitely as I got older, there's been times when I've been more lazy in this and I haven't really expressed myself as I would want to. But I think someone who truly takes this seriously and truly expresses their life as art, not just has art in their life, but has their entire life as this massive art piece, thinks very intentionally about all the different things that they want to do. And there's a couple trends that I think relate to this. Things like having a main character moment, or making, doing things that make you feel like the main character. I think that can definitely relate to this life as art, because you see, and you don't have to be the main character to have your life as an expression of art. I just want to say that as well, but it kind of pushes you in that direction. Also, the trend of romanticizing your life, I think, relates to it as well. It's not exactly the same thing, but it has that same thought pattern of this artistic expression, which is your life. But yeah, and to try and summarize exactly how I have viewed my own life as art and how I've tried to express myself in this artistic form through every decision that I make, is I never just look at something as, do I want this? Do I need this? Is this like practically necessary? But I look at it as like, how does it fit into the canvas that is like my whole life from start to finish? The day I was born, the day I'm gonna die. Like, how does this paint this long picture? It's kind of like, and in order to do it really well, I think you mustn't expect anyone to appreciate it or to praise you for it. You only have to see it as important to you. And so, but looking at your whole life and say like, look, if this was a documentary, or if this was a novel, or like, what would make it the most meaningful, the most, not even entertaining, but just significant, and like, what would make my life worth writing a memoir about? And not caring whether anyone ever knows these things, not caring any of that. But like, I keep a journal, which I try and write in more or less every day. But if there's nothing to write, then I don't bother too much about it. And I've been doing this now for the past 3 years and like 2 months or so, I think. And part of why I started doing this was so that I could improve my writing skills. And I think for anyone who wants to improve their writing skills, that's a great idea. Do a daily journal. But from the very beginning of doing this journal, I wasn't trying to just write down random thoughts and random ideas, but I was trying to write something that if anyone would read it, they would enjoy how I wrote it, not just what I wrote. And that like, I write it in almost an artistic style. And I think it's just this idea of looking at every small detail and the bigger details of your life, whether it is a career decision, whether it is lunch decisions, like what you're gonna have for lunch or dinner or whatever the questions are. Looking at it all and seeing, does this fit into the artwork that I'm trying to create? Does this add to the person that I'm trying to sculpt myself into, and to the point where anyone will look at any part of your life, any little detail, and say, oh wow, that makes so much sense, that fits in here, that fits in there. They all come together and they make this unison. And kind of reflecting a bit on what I spoke about yesterday, the thing of patterns, the thing of repetitive things, like it makes sense, and it's comforting to have that uniformity in your life. Even though I'm a very big fan of change, I'm a big fan of new things, of exploring, of adventures, that in itself is a pattern, that in itself is a consistent expression, which I try and nurture in my life. So all of that was me specifically, how I view my life as art, but what does that have to do with art in general? What is art? And specifically, what makes photography art? What differentiates different types of photography? Are they all art? I think that there are two significant aspects, directions, I'll explain in a moment, directions of art. And the one is the creator or the artist's perspective, and the other one is the observer's perspective, or whoever is seeing this art. And the significance in this is, I think both of them, how do I word this? It's like the artist can create art, and it is art to the artist. And it doesn't need to be recognized by anybody outside of the artist in order to be art. And that's one form of art. However, another form of art, I think, is purely based on the observer. So where the observer sees something and perceives it as art, and that turns that thing into art. And why I think that both of these are equally significant is things that are created with the intention of being art have a much higher probability as being observed as art, but that completely negates things that we see, for instance, in nature, or things that we present in a specific way to turn it from ordinary into artistic. To take an example, you have, let's take a painter, and I'm going to turn, so the painter is both the observer and the artist, because first the painter has to find whatever subject they have. Let's say this is a realist painter, and so they are painting a landscape to make it easy. So the landscape is the art, and the painter is the observer, and through that observation turns the landscape into art, and then copies that art onto their canvas, creating a new piece of art. And therefore they become the artist, and because of their intentionality they've created new art, but they've also created art from what was already there. Maybe that's a bit complicated, don't worry too much about it. In summary, I think what really defines art is intention. The difference between creativity, pure and simple, intelligence, skills, and art is intention. If you are building a building, most architects will take pride in their work, but there is still a difference between an architect that builds a building for practicality and an architect that builds a building for beauty. And now hopefully the one doing it for beauty also incorporates practicality, for two reasons. I think beauty involves practicality, and practicality can be beautiful, but also if it's not a practical building, then that can be very dangerous and not very useful to whoever hopefully would live there or work there or use it for whatever purpose it was made. So I think art needs to have a sense of practicality, or else it will fall apart first and foremost. But some art pieces are designed to be fragile in that sense, and that can also be beautiful. But here is the difference between art and practicality, or art and just creativity that can lend to anything, because you need creativity to build a building. The difference is intention. Are you intending this to be purely practical, or are you intending this to be something more than practical, something to be appreciated in its details, in its entirety. And that's where it goes back to how I view my life as this work of art and life as art, where I like to see the significance of how everything comes together, how it all fits into each other piece by piece, and I think that's so beautiful and such an incredible expression of art. But back to the architect, therefore I think that any practical skill can be turned into an artistic expression, but you must strive for excellence. Art strives for excellence. And going back to one of the quotes that I read yesterday from Leonardo da Vinci, where he says, "Art is never finished, it is only abandoned." I think that goes back to that striving for excellence. Anything that is art strives for excellence to the point where it will never be satisfied, but it creates something beautiful in the process. Now, leading off of that, what makes photography art and what forms of photography are art or are not art? I think, again, it is one of the things I read yesterday is the art of doing something versus fine arts, etc. Now, you get a lot of fine art photography, and even in that there are many subcategories. I think that a lot of photography is art. And definitely the photography that you are most used to thinking about when you think about hiring a photographer, I would consider falls into the category of art. Probably the most of the professional photography that you see on a daily basis also falls into the category of art. This includes a lot of things like advertisements and a lot, or simply things like the photos that you had professionally taken at your wedding, etc. I think this is very much art in photography because each one of those photographers has their own artistic style and they have very specific intentions when they're taking a photo. They have very clear visions, most likely, in how they want to take their photos. Even though they were hired to do this, they have their own artistic styles and their own way of expressing themselves through their photographs, which I think makes it art. Then you get things like documentary photography, and even though I think that there can be art in that, and I love it, I love documentary photography, especially when you're incorporating it into things like weddings or events or stuff like that, but strictly speaking, like documentary photography when it comes to journalism or documenting the type of things that you would see in like National Geographic or anything like that, where it is purely going into a situation that is an everyday or something happening in the news or whatever you're documenting. I think that even though you could say that is the art of documenting life or something like that, in and of itself, I wouldn't call that an artistic piece, most likely. And that's where you start to ask all these questions and blur those lines. Where is this art? Is it not art? Because I think it is incredibly amazing and it takes a lot of work and a lot of skill, sometimes more skill. But it has a lot less of an artistic expression to it because it is much more the simple act of capturing something that is already there. It is a much more of a practical act. Usually it tends to have a lot less editing involved, a lot less post-production, which alters it to the artist's or photographer's style. And not to say that you need to edit or have post-production in order for your photography to be art. I think some of the most incredible photography art is minimal post-production because that's an incredible talent in itself to be able to achieve your end result mainly in camera. But yeah, photography, 100% an art. That's what I think. And an art form, definitely. Like on the levels of painting, sculpting, drawing, definitely. But you also have to look at which types. Like if you're comparing something like a Rembrandt painting with an architectural blueprint, the one you will hang in a museum, the other most likely will not. And the same goes for types of photography. There are styles and types of photography, which is fine art photography, or even documenting weddings and things, which goes much more into, I think, the artistic things. Portraits, magazine covers, editorial, very artistic in my mind. And then you have journalistic, documenting nature, wildlife, which is not specifically fine art, but more in documenting what's already there. That, I think, is more on the side of having the blueprint. It is practical. It can be incredibly beautiful. But I think that those things in and of themselves don't represent art as much as the observer can turn them into art. The same as someone who absolutely loves architecture can look at any building and see it as an art form. Someone who doesn't care about architecture at all would go, whatever, that's like a really boring house. But if they saw some of the incredible architectures all over the world, things like the Taj Mahal, things like incredible cathedrals in Europe, stuff like that, then they would have to step back, and even if they don't appreciate architecture or art per se, they cannot deny that that is art. And I think that's the difference between perceived art or the perceiver creating art and the artist creating art. I hope that some of this made sense. I feel like it was a more philosophical discussion, and I'm definitely, especially from the first part, I don't know yet, I haven't done the editing, but I'm definitely gonna have to cut back a lot of things and narrow it down. I did a lot of talking today. But yeah, please tell me what of this resonated with you, what of it went completely over your head, if you got questions, if you got things that you want to understand better, and I will see you guys again in 2 weeks' time.